The America into which Ralph Waldo Emerson was born was a nation on the verge of great changes. Just a short generation before, it had freed itself politically and economically from England, a freedom that would soon be tested in the War of 1812. Its example of democracy had inspired the French to overthrow their own monarchy. And yet this newest of nations was unsure of itself. Still looking to Europe for culture, still clinging to many of the institutions bequeathed by the British. It would be up to Emerson to carry the revolution to individual men and women by exhorting them to a freedom of the spirit as well.
Why should we not also enjoy an original relation to the universe? Why should we not have a poetry and philosophy of insight and not of tradition, and a religion by revelation to us and not the history of theirs?
Emerson was a universal man, but also a quintessential New Englander. He was born in Boston, attended Harvard, and although he traveled widely in America and in Europe, he lived from 1835 on in this house in Concord, Massachusetts. He came from a long line of respectable Puritan stock, many of them Unitarian and Congregationalist ministers, like his father. William Emerson was the pastor of the First, or Old Brick, Church of Boston, and was a man of wide-ranging interest who made a comfortable living for his wife and their 6 children. But William Emerson died when Waldo was 8, and although his widow received a small pension from the church, the family fell into poverty, sometimes feasting on stories and conversation rather than food. Despite their reversal of fortune, Waldo's mother, Ruth Haskins Emerson, was determined that he receive a good education. While she took in boarders, he and his younger brother Edward would take turns going to the Boston Latin School, since they had only one overcoat between them. For long periods of his childhood, Waldo lived here in Concord, in a house built by his grandfather, which came to be known as the Old Manse. Much of his real education at this time came from a succession of brilliant women, family friends and relatives, such as Hannah Adams and Sarah Alden Bradford Ripley.
Emerson grew up in a world of women, mostly. His father died when he was very young. And there were aunts, and there was Mary Moody Emerson, and there were his mother's women friends, including a famous woman geographer, Hannah Adams, who were around the house, and these were his influences. So he worked easily and comfortably within a world of intellectual women. And the powerhouse in the group was Mary Moody Emerson, clearly. When she had enormous energy of mind, and she had a kind of, we would call it now, almost a sort of prophetic vigor and strain.
In letters and in person, she encouraged all the Emerson children to read widely, think deeply, to love nature, and to love God. She was in many ways the model for self-reliance.
And I think what she taught him, it seems almost inevitable, was the power of individual force of utterance and individual inspiration.
Following the tradition of his father and older brother William, Waldo was accepted into Harvard with a scholarship at the age of 14. While at Harvard in 1820, he began to keep a journal, a practice he would continue almost until his death. It did not begin auspiciously. On October 25th, he wrote, "I find myself often idle, vagrant, stupid, and hollow. This is somewhat appalling, and if I do not discipline myself with diligent care, I shall suffer severely from remorse and the sense of inferiority hereafter. All around me are the industrious and shall be great. I am indolent and shall be insignificant." But also in his journal, he begins to record ecstatic religious experiences of identification with what he would later call the Oversoul.
I say to the universe, Mighty One, thou art not my mother. Return to chaos if thou wilt. I shall exist. I live. If I owe my being, it is to a destiny greater than thine. Star by star, world by world, system by system shall be crushed, but I shall live.
Emerson's career at Harvard and for some time thereafter gave little indication of the confidence and purpose that would mark his later life. He graduated in the middle of his class and then taught for some time at a school for young ladies his brother William had established. While this improved the family finances, it was not a vocation that he relished. When William left in 1823 to study in Germany, Waldo took over the school only to close it a year later. He intermittently pursued studies at the Harvard Divinity School, from which he was approbated to preach in 1826.
There were burgeoning orators who were the ministers, who were the political speakers, who were the teachers. And if you think about Boston on the time that Emerson was growing up, he would have had access to all of those kinds of speakers.
For the next couple of years, he served as a part-time supply preacher at various churches in New England. But he was also plagued with ill health and made several trips south to Florida to recover. But while his outward circumstances were unpromising, inwardly, he was beginning to feel a call of a higher vocation and a connection to a God not of rituals, but of experience. On a trip to Florida in 1827, he wrote in his journal,
There is a pleasure in the thought that the particular tone of my mind at this moment may be new in the universe, that the emotions of this hour may be peculiar and unexampled in the whole eternity of moral being. I lead a new life. I occupy new ground in the world of spirits, untenanted before. I commence a career of thought and action which is expanding before me into a distant and dazzling infinity. Strange thoughts start up like angels in my way and beckon me onward. I doubt not I tread on the highway that leads to the divinity.
However, the practicalities of life were leading him down a more conventional path. When preaching in Concord, New Hampshire, he had met the charming teenaged Ellen Louisa Tucker, and in December of 1828, they became engaged. Of her, he wrote,
She has the purity and confiding religion of an angel. Are the words common? The words are true. Will God forgive me my sins and aid me to deserve this gift of His mercy?
In 1829, he was ordained into the ministry at the Second Church of Boston, and on